I love the Atari VCS and have talked about a couple of its games already, but now it's time to introduce another console, the Magnavox Odyssey 2. This massive silver beast was one of the earliest cartridge-based consoles, and attempted to go toe-to-toe with the Atari VCS. Previously, Magnavox had released the original Odyssey in 1972, making it the very first ever home video game console. The games on that console were about as rudimentary as they come, only having you control a white on-screen paddle and using TV screen overlays and physical game board-like elements to handle the graphics, scoring, and general rules. The games came on these cards that, when inserted into the system, would completely rewrite the entire computer itself, rather than just reading game data off of a ROM cartridge. This was then followed up by several Pong consoles that did away with game cards entirely. As you may have been able to guess then, the Odyssey brand was looking pretty dated in '76, when systems like the Fairchild Channel F had just been released, and Atari's upcoming home video computer system was lining up for a release the following year. Magnavox was now starting to fall behind in a market they had essentially created. In early '77, Magnavox's president would make an announcement that the company would be creating a microprocessor-based game system that they hoped would be ready by the end of the year. After a slow start to research and development, including the project itself basically getting canceled for a brief time due to lack of confidence that they would be able to properly compete in the market, as well as a lack of programmers to create compelling software, the project would end up being delayed into 1978. If you're interested in getting the full story, you can follow the link in the description for the complete project timeline. Right away, you can see its most defining feature compared to the competition: the built-in keyboard. The Odyssey 2 would end up having quite a few educational games, and unfortunately, those were generally the games that made the most use of it. The keyboard was also used to reset the system and select different games or game variations. So long as you have the instruction manual for the game to tell you what key does what, this is a much better solution than having to hit a select switch countless times to get the game mode you want. Having the game settings tied to the console means that the controllers themselves are pretty basic. You've got an 8-directional joystick and a red action button. The layout is very similar to the Atari joystick controller, but the Odyssey 2's joystick is much shorter and has a lot more give to it. The action button also doesn't push down as far as I was expecting, but I got used to it eventually. I do like how the button blends nicely into the rectangular design of the rest of the controller. The only negative thing I can really say about them is that they're hardwired to the console. That means no replacing the controller if something goes wrong, and no alternate or aftermarket controllers if you want a different control option. The wires themselves are also really short for some reason. I guess they were expecting you to have the console next to you on the floor or couch or something, so you could easily access the keyboard, but it's kind of a pain in my current setup. I always fear I'm going to accidentally pull the connection too hard and break the controller. Anyways, the system ended up selling around 2 million units worldwide, enough to find a small following in the early '80s. But it soon faded into obscurity by the end of 1983, and by early 1984, hardware production had ceased entirely and game support had officially ended. Now, between not having big programming talent from the start, the lack of known arcade hits and IP to be able to bring to the home, and late/extremely limited third-party support, the Odyssey 2 didn't have nearly the library of games that the Atari VCS had, only about 50 games in total. But it did have some pretty great titles in that lineup. Having said all that, the game, or games in this case, I'm about to talk about are not necessarily in that category. Originally released in 1978, Speedway/Spinout/Cryptologic, which I will now be referring to as SSC from here on out, is a 3-in-1 cartridge that came as a pack-in with the console. Wow, really? 3 entire video games included with the system? The Atari only came with 1 game. That seems like the better option already. This is what the cartridges look like for the Odyssey 2. The standard cartridge design would be used by all of their internally developed games. My favorite thing about them is the nifty handle on it. It might look a bit goofy, but the carts themselves fit very tightly in the slot, so I actually understand their reasoning with it. I usually have to hold the console down while pulling on the handle to get them out. It also features box art on the cartridge, which is something Atari wouldn't do until a few years and a couple of reprints later into the system's life. Between the unique design and the exciting '70s future look on the art itself, Odyssey 2 games are pretty fun to collect for. The only thing they're missing is an end label, which is why I had to make my own crappy looking ones just so I could find the game I wanted on the shelf. The first game included on the cart is Speedway. I'm sorry, Speedway! Exclamation mark. You're immediately asked what skill level you want to play. According to the manual, level 1 is the qualifying time trials and is called a learning level for adults and a playing level for children. The game is basically the Odyssey's simplified attempt at Atari's Street Racer, a game I was already not a big fan of due to its repetitive nature. Still, I'm going to give the game a fair shot. The controls are very simple. Push up on the joystick to accelerate, pull back to brake, and push left and right to steer. You drive down the world's straightest, longest racetrack ever for 2 minutes, dodging opponents' cars while earning points. As long as your car is moving, you'll be scoring said points. The faster you drive, the faster your score counter goes up. If you crash into a car, not shown here because time trials is super easy and I never died, the timer continues until your car respawns, and you'll have to re-accelerate from a standstill. The cars themselves are on a pattern, and as soon as you learn that pattern, you could probably dodge cars forever, or at least until you get so bored of the game that you crash into something due to lack of focus. For me, that started to become a challenge within the first 60 seconds, and it was only in trying to get a perfect run for the gameplay capture that kept me going. The second level, titled The Main Event! Is significantly more challenging. Like, seriously, you go so fast at full speed in this mode that I found it hard to go more than 10 seconds without a crash. Not gonna lie though, I did get a bit hooked on this mode trying to get over 4,000 points. You almost have to go into a zen-like trance to do well in this mode. It reminds me a bit of Starship in the sense that it has two difficulties, one that's so easy it's boring, and one that's so immediately difficult that it's almost off-putting at first but ends up annoying me into trying to do better. I mean, I guess it really comes down to the specific instance, but in these cases I find the frustration of getting my butt handed to me repeatedly and trying to overcome it to be a greater motivation than succeeding at something that doesn't require almost anything from me. And, well, that's about everything I can really say about Speedway. One game down and I'm already not very impressed. The second game, Spinout! Is another kind of racing game. Specifically, it's the Odyssey's take on Atari's Indy 500, which was already a home conversion of the 1975 arcade game Indy 800. It's a two-player only game viewed from an overhead style, where your only goal is to complete a set number of laps before your opponent. Pressing 2 on the Odyssey's keyboard brings you to a 3-lap mode, and pressing 3 selects the 15-lap variation. You use the joystick to drive in whichever direction it's pointing, and press the action button to drive faster. Hitting a wall will cause your car to either spin out or straight up crash, and which one ends up occurring seems to be at complete random. Hitting the other player will also cause one of you to spin out, but once again, I couldn't find any sort of pattern to what makes the game determine which unlucky player's on the receiving end of it. I even checked the manual and it said a collision between cars will cause one of the cars to spin out. So there you go, even the manual writer didn't know. There are 4 difficulties here. The first is a low-speed race on what the game calls the clear track. 1 lap in and I was already ready for something more challenging. The second level is still set on the same clear track, but this time your cars move much faster. The third is back to a slower speed, but introduces the barrier track. The layout in this track is the exact same, but there are now added barriers to negotiate on the top section. And finally, as you probably already guessed, the 4th level is the barrier track with the faster speed setting. This one was my personal favorite, mostly down to the amount of chaos that ensues in trying to complete it at full speed. Like, you could let off the gas on the barrier section, but why would you, really? The only real issue in this mode is that you now move so fast, even when not pressing the action button, that you can sort of get stuck for a bit in the barriers. Sometimes I had to let go of the joystick entirely just to see which way my car was facing, and then carefully take off again in a safe direction. Overall, Spinout's not exactly a bad game, but it fundamentally fails to match the fun of Indy 500/800. See, the thing that made those titles classics was down to how you actually controlled your cars. The arcade game had physical steering wheels for each player, and Indy 500 used modified paddle controllers called the Atari driving controllers. Both of those were fun and gimmicky control methods that made learning and mastering said controls part of the appeal. As soon as that's stripped away in favor of a traditional 8-directional joystick, it suddenly exposes just how simple the core gameplay is. Also, because you can pretty much change directions instantly, and letting off the joystick means stopping instantly, it means it doesn't even really feel like racing a car at all. It's more like racing a simple car-shaped sprite around a short maze. Moving on to the third and final game included on the cartridge, it's Crypto Logic. And no, this isn't a game about playing as a crypto bro annoying your non-crypto friends about why they should invest their real money into the digital currency of the week. Instead, it's a word scramble game. A very simple word scramble game. It does make use of the console's built-in keyboard, which makes sense since this is a pack-in title and they would have wanted to show off all the system's features. But this honestly feels more like a gimmick that only would have been impressive in 1978. One player types in a word, name, or even multiple words, so long as it's less than 15 characters, and then presses enter on the keyboard. The Odyssey then scrambles the word, and it's up to the other player, or players, to guess what it is. Any key they press that isn't the next letter in the series counts as a try, and the goal is to complete the word in the fewest number of tries. You could also just write a scrambled word on a piece of paper and have your friends try and guess. It would have saved a lot of money back in the day. And yeah, there really isn't much else to say about this one either. This feels like one of the Odyssey programmers was playing around with a word scramble game to test out the use of the keyboard, but didn't have time to turn it into something more substantial. It's like the rest of the team saw it, thought it was neat, and didn't want it to go unused, so they just kind of threw it in with a couple of other racing games. Its presence here just feels so out of place. So that's SSC. I honestly didn't go into the game expecting to be so critical of it, and I do generally try and be as fair as I can with these old games, but I don't know about this one. It's basically just a collection of extremely simple game ideas tossed together. While it did technically offer more variety back in the day than Atari's pack-in title Combat, I would much prefer to play that over SSC. Combat is another simple game concept, but it has a bunch of additional game modes and variations to really help flesh it out. It feels like they took the idea as far as it could go. With SSC, the first two games feel like the we have Atari at home versions of existing releases, and the third is a fun little game to show off to your friends and family exactly one time, and then you'll probably never think about it again. I realize now that choosing to play SSC didn't exactly show off the Odyssey 2 in the best of lights, but I wanted to give the full Odyssey 2 Day 1 experience, so I felt like I had to play this one. I'll definitely have to do videos on some of its better games at some point down the road. Until then, this has got me in the mood to play some Street Racer and Indy 500. Well, really just Indy 500.